have to look at what it means to do things with God and not just for God. Does that make sense? A lot of times as believers and as Christians, we get caught up on making sure that the song is right, making sure that the sermon is right, making sure that our activities, this is for the youth leaders, making sure our evening activity is right, that the Little Caesars is still hot. We try to make sure that everything lines up because we're doing this for God. But I want to challenge us to think what would happen if we did things with God, right? When we do things with God, there's something that happens. We feel differently. I had a dream yesterday, and it really shook me this morning. So like everything that I was going to share today kind of got shifted and changed at like 6:30 this morning when I woke up. And I never wake up that early, by the way. One Heart is the only place that can get me to wake up that early. So, but I had a dream last night, and it really arrested my thoughts. And then I'll share some of it. But it alluded to this idea of doing things with God instead of for God. So I was on this bus. It was some tour bus of some sort. It was blue with the hard plastic seats. It was I don't know who I was with. I knew I was by myself, but I was on this bus and we were taking a tour of this city, this big metropolitan city, and it felt like a New York or Toronto, but very big, very metropolis. And there was, as we were going through, the bus driver was giving us a tour, and he said, there's a church right there. This is, some of you all know this big church, and I can't remember the name that he said of the church, but this church used to be one of the biggest churches in America. And you could see, like you couldn't even see the church because the parking structure was so big. And the parking structure looked like a mall all within itself, like had these glass windows and like you could tell where the cars were. It was just this huge, ginormous thing. And he said, a lot of people don't know this, but there's only one member at that church. The only member at that church is the leader. Everyone else is just visitors. They just come and go, but there's really only one member there. I was like, that's interesting. So as we're continuing to go, and he's giving us a tour, and then I look out the window, and there's like this group of people, this massive group of young adults, right? And they're all chanting, "Great Messiah, great Messiah." They were like, it was like a chant / song, but I don't remember what it was. And they're all chanting this, and I couldn't, put, faces to it, but there was one person that stood out to me. I mean, he had like this curly hair. He kind of looked like Corbin Bleu from High School Musical, And so he was very racially ambiguous, and I think to me that just signified like the diversity of the group or diversity of that generation. But anyways, they were all chanting, "Great Messiah, great Messiah." Then this guy comes out. Granted, mind you, this is outside, right? Like out of a scene of Ninja Turtles, like the fog is coming out of the sewer, the ground is wet, but it didn't rain. Like it's just this dirty, big city, and they're all outside chanting "Great Messiah." And this guy comes with like this ponytail, he's kind of thin, and he's got like the mic, you know what I mean? Like the Britney Spears mic, the one that comes from. And he comes out and he's cheering on the crowd. The crowd's like, "Great Messiah." And he comes out and they're like, yeah. Now, they weren't necessarily calling him Messiah. However, you can tell he was leading this movement. He was like in charge of this thing. And so he's like, "Do you guys want to see a miracle?" And they're like, "Yeah." "Do you guys believe in signs and wonders?" They're like, "Yeah." And so, mind you, we're outside, and there's not necessarily a stage, but it's very clear where the focus of the energy is. And so there was these group of girls who were there, and they were dressed like they had just came out of a club or dancing or something like that. They weren't dressed appropriately, but their bodies were disformed. Some of them didn't have legs. Some of them, it was very odd. And it seemed like they had just kind of stumbled upon the group and just wanted to be a part. And they're over there dancing, doing their thing. And the guy says, "Do you guys want to see a miracle?" And he says, "Yeah." And then he does this signal, like this hand signal over them. And he makes them do this very strange and very perverse thing. And it was very odd. And the crowd goes crazy. They're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, So then flashes back to I'm on this bus. And I'm on this bus, and there's all of these people on the bus as well, but there's some people with these polo shirts on. And listen, when I woke up, I'm making the same face you're making. I'm like, what is happening, right? These guys, these people had on these polo shirts, and they were on this bus trying to perform miracles. and they wanted people to write down their testimonies and like hand them in. And they had like this booth like station on the bus, like at the airport where you have to do a self check-in, or like in customs where you have to like take a picture of yourself and type in or whatever. There was like one of those on the bus. And after your miracle was performed, you were supposed to go over there, type in your testimonial or whatever. So I'm sitting on the bus on the hard blue plastic seat, like the one that has the dip in it for each of your thighs, you know what I mean? I don't know why they ever constructed the buses that way. It's not comfortable, and everyone's thighs aren't the same. So why? Anyways, so I'm sitting in the seat, and the guy, he points to me and he says, "Does your knee hurt?" And I'm like, He's like, "Does your knee hurt?" He's like, "Does your knee hurt? Your right knee?" And I'm like, man, he's right. My knee does hurt. You know, my knee hurts right now, actually. I have bad knees. And so he says, "Does your knee hurt?" And I say, "Yeah." And then he starts describing my pain. He's like, "It's hard to walk. It feels like something is sticking out and you have to walk like this." And in my mind, I'm like, okay, now you're doing too much. Like, it doesn't hurt that bad. Like, I can walk. But yes, my knee does hurt. But I didn't want to split hairs here because I know that miracles are real and I know that, that healing can take place. And so I said, yes, my knee does hurt. And he says, okay, stand up. And I come stand up, and then he lays his hands on my knee and he says something like, "You're healed," or whatever. And I feel like this numbing feeling, this strong, tight numbing feeling, like when you put too much Orajel on, And so then he goes, "Did you feel that? Do you feel better?" And I did feel it. I wouldn't necessarily say I felt better, but I did feel it. And I said, yeah, I do. But I was conflicted because I didn't want to buy into the gimmick. I knew what was happening, but I also know that I didn't want to lie and say I didn't feel anything. So I said, yes, I did. He says, okay, great, go. And he ushered me to this booth. He says, now, do your testimonial. And then he turns around and walks away and goes to somebody else. And then I wake up. And I think for me, that dream, there's a lot that I have to unpack here. I got to call my dad. Well, he's probably see this and I'll let him tell me what he thinks it means. But for me, I think what I walked away realizing is that we get so caught up in doing the thing. We get so caught up in the sign and in the miracle that we forget what it's for. Miracles are signs to get your attention to point to Christ. Your attention shouldn't just be on the miracle. Now, I want to be very, very clear. Miracles do happen. You can be healed right here, right now. And it's not a gimmick. It is real. But there was a gross industrialization of that happening in the dream. And it showed how people's focus was they were so focused on doing things for this organization, like coordinate all their colors that were wearing blue, that they forgot they didn't do it with God. Okay, does that make sense? So I don't want to villainize or speak badly on healing, because that does happen. I've been in services, or I've seen people be healed and people who were blind can see. I've seen people's legs grow right in the middle of the service. So I do know that happens, and it can happen today if that's what God chooses to do. But our focus can't be on that. Our focus has to be on God. Does that make sense? When we do things with God, he can move in real time. We don't have to wait for him to show up to move. We don't have to set the stage and do all of this stuff because we want God to show up. But if we're doing it right, he's here with us right now. And he's already with us in the preparation for what we're doing. Does that make sense? He'll do it right there because Emmanuel, God is with us.